The river woke before the people. Its surface shimmered with the first touch of dawn, carrying whispers of reeds and the steady patience of time. Mist rose in gentle spirals, folding the city of Briston in a veil of silver silence. The walls, built from pale limestone, caught the early light as though they had been waiting all night for this moment. In the quiet lanes, doors creaked open without hurry. A woman swept her threshold, her broom marking small circles that would vanish with the breeze. Children rubbed their eyes and chased shadows across the cobblestones, their laughter as soft as birdsong. Somewhere, bread baked in clay ovens, releasing a fragrance that drifted into every street, a reminder that life began each day with warmth. The people of Briston lived as if time itself were sacred. They did not rush against it. They walked with it, step by step, as if keeping company with an old friend. To them, stone was not only stone, it was memory. Water was not only water, it was promise. And every breath of wind carried lessons older than their own names. They built not to conquer, but to endure. They prayed not for triumph, but for balance. Even their fears came gently, like shadows cast by passing clouds present, but never overwhelming. And when night returned, as it always did, the city folded itself into quiet once more. Lanterns flickered out, ovens cooled, and the river kept its watch in the darkness. Briston rested beneath the northern sky, where silence was not emptiness, but the softest form of memory, and the city slept beneath the northern sky. The first light of morning touched the waters long before it reached the streets of Briston. The river stirred with a low murmur, as if it had been whispering all night to the stones that lined its banks. A thin veil of mist drifted above the surface, wrapping everything in silver. Here, dawn was not an arrival, but a slow awakening, gentle and unhurried, as though the day itself was taking a deep breath before beginning. Fishermen were the first to appear. They stepped from their doorways with quiet purpose, their nets folded neatly under one arm, their sandals leaving faint marks in the damp earth. They did not speak loudly, they did not need to, each gesture tying a knot, lifting an oar. Loosening a rope was a language older than words. The river accepted them like an old companion. Boats pushed forward, slicing the water with barely a sound, carrying their passengers into the slow current of the day. Children came next. Sleep still clung to their eyes, yet curiosity drew them to the water's edge. They bent low, tracing patterns in the mud with sticks, watching the circles widen and fade. One child lifted a jar to fill it, and for a moment the world doubled sky above. Sky reflected below. She smiled, as though she had touched two worlds at once. It was such a small thing. Yet in Briston, small things were never overlooked. Every jar carried water, but also memory. Every step upon the worn stones was a reminder of those who had walked there before. By mid-morning, the riverbank grew busier. Women carried baskets of cloth to wash, laying them on flat stones that glistened with dew. The rhythm of hands against fabric created a music of its own, steady, patient, like the heartbeat of the city. When they paused, they listened to the calls of herons and the rustle of reeds, sounds that had been the same for generations. It was ordinary life, but to the people of Briston, ordinary was sacred. There was always a sense of patience here. The people did not rush to complete their tasks. They allowed the day to unfold in its own rhythm. Time was not measured only by the rising sun, but by the sound of a millstone turning, the laughter of a child echoing across the water, the scent of bread cooling in a shaded courtyard. Every detail mattered, and yet nothing pressed heavily upon them. It was life in harmony. Life lived as though the earth itself had set the pace. Still, beneath the calm, there lingered memory of trial. The river, so gentle today, had once swollen with anger, flooding the fields and testing the patience of its people. Fishermen remembered pulling their boats high onto the banks, tying them to trees, watching as paths disappeared under the rushing current. That memory never vanished. It lived quietly in every glance at the waterline. And so, even in peace, there was caution like a shadow that softened the light without extinguishing it. This was the mini-fall of their days, a reminder that even kindness could change its face. But on this morning, the river was kind. Its voice was low and even, carrying boats toward fertile bends, reflecting willows whose branches brushed the surface with affection. Fishermen sang under their breath, lines tugging softly in the current. A child clapped when a silver fish leapt, its scales flashing like coins scattered by the sun. This was the mini-rise joy found not in grandeur but in small wonders that arrived without warning. By noon, the stone steps that led from the water to the city shimmered with warmth. People climbed slowly, balancing jars upon their heads, leading donkeys laden with reeds and baskets. The streets filled with the quiet buzz of life, beginning in earnest, traders arranging goods, priests sweeping temple thresholds, craftsmen unlocking their workshops. And yet, the river remained the city's first teacher, reminding all who lived beside it that patience was strength, and silence was not emptiness, but fullness. The day stretched onward, but dawn remained etched in memory. It lingered in the cool of the water stored in clay jars, in the smell of fresh fish carried through narrow lanes, in the sound of children still repeating the morning's laughter. For the people of Briston, dawn was never lost. It was folded gently into the rest of the day, as a note is folded into a song. When evening arrived, the river held the last light as carefully as it had welcomed the first. Its surface glowed, and in that glow the city recognized its own reflection, patient, enduring, quietly alive. And as stars rose, the people withdrew to their homes, leaving the river to dream once more. The city had awakened with the river, and now it returned to rest with the river, and the city slept beneath the northern sky. The homes of Briston stood like patient guardians of the people's days. They were built not for grandeur, but for comfort. Blocks of pale limestone, lifted carefully and set with steady hands, rose into walls that glowed faintly in the morning light. The stone was warm to the touch, carrying yesterday's sun into the cool of dawn. Each house seemed to breathe with its family, holding their warmth, their laughter, their silence. Doorways were simple, yet never bare. Some were carved with vines and circles, marks that had no need of words to carry meaning. To enter a Briston home was to step into a place of rhythm, where every gesture had been repeated for generations, yet never lost its gentleness. Inside, the hearth was the heart. It burned with slow wood, its smoke curling softly through an opening above. The fire was not fierce, it was steady. A reminder that life did not require sparks and roar, but quiet endurance. Bread cooled on wooden shelves. Wrapped in cloth patterned with rivers, the smell drifted across the rooms, weaving itself into the very walls. A child would always remember that smell: warm bread, cooling stone, voices low with kindness. Minnie rise, a mother lifted the lid of a pot, and steam filled the air like dawn, spilling into a dark valley. The stew within was simple grain, lentils, a handful of herbs yet to the hungry. It was a feast. A father sat cross-legged near the hearth, repairing a reed mat. His hands moved with patience, each stroke of fiber against fiber, like the sound of distant rain. Children sat nearby, tracing their fingers across the grooves of a clay bowl. As though reading a script older than their years, there was no hurry in these tasks. Time itself seemed to pause, watching the scene unfold. Neighbors called from door to door. Their voices never rose sharply, but floated with the softness of a lullaby. A question asked, an answer given, a laugh shared. Walls of stone carried these sounds gently, holding them as a memory for tomorrow. In Briston, sound was never wasted. It belonged to the community, settling over the homes like evening light. Minnie fall, yet the houses were not without worry. Sometimes frost crept into the corners, leaving thin cracks that whispered of weakness. In one room, a stone carried a line like a scar, a reminder of the last winter's severity. The family who lived there pressed their palms against it, not in fear, but in recognition. They patched the seam with lime, smoothing it carefully, as though healing an old wound. The crack remained faintly visible. But in Briston, imperfections were not hidden. They were part of the story, part of the patience required to endure. Every house had small gestures that spoke of care. A bowl of water was left near the doorway, ready for returning feet to wash the dust of the day. A reed mat rested by the hearth, worn but tended with pride. Above the hearth, clay figurines watched with silent eyes, symbols of ancestors, protectors, or perhaps simply reminders that life was always larger than one household. To a stranger, these might seem simple ornaments. To the family, they were memory itself, made solid. As daylight faded, lamps of oil replaced the sun. Their glow painted the stone walls with shadows that danced softly, flickering like breath. The family gathered close, telling stories not in the language of epic battles, but of small kindnesses, how the neighbor shared figs, how the child learned to swim, how the roof withstood last night's rain. Stories were threads woven into the stone, making the home not only a shelter, but a living archive. And when the final lamp dimmed, silence stretched across the house. The hearth cooled. The bread was stored. The mats laid neatly on the floor. Children curled against their parents, and parents against the faith that tomorrow would be kind. The house exhaled with them, its stone walls keeping watch in the dark. Outside, the city was quiet, each home a soft lantern of breath within the greater whole. Together, the houses of Briston were not separate structures, but one body, each room a heartbeat, each hearth a pulse of warmth. The limestone glowed faintly under the starlight, as though even the earth itself wanted to protect the people it had allowed to build upon it. And so the night deepened. The river whispered nearby. The houses, those steady guardians of warmth and memory, leaned into the silence, and the city slept beneath the northern sky. Beyond the stone walls of Briston, the earth opened itself like a wide and patient book. The fields stretched into the morning haze, their soil dark and fertile, marked with furrows that told of long practice and careful hands. Here, the people of Briston met the quiet challenge of survival each day, not with shouts or conquest, but with patience. The soil asked for time, and they gave it. The river was their partner, always near, always watching. Its waters were guided into channels cut with care, moving steadily through carved paths that shone like ribbons of silver in the sun. The sound of flowing water was a song of continuity, carrying with it the promise of green stalks and heavy grain. Oxen leaned into the yoke, their steady breaths forming clouds in the cool morning air. Each step pressed into the soil like an ancient drumbeat. Slow, certain, eternal. Many rise when the seeds were planted. There was hope in every handful of grain. Children followed their parents, scattering kernels into the earth, giggling when birds swooped low, eager to steal what was not theirs. But even the birds became part of the rhythm, chased off with laughter, remembered in stories told at night. In time, green rose rose like an army of slender soldiers, standing at attention, swaying gently in the wind. The sight filled the people with quiet pride, a reminder that patience bore fruit and that tomorrow's bread was already stirring in the soil. The millstones by the canal added their own music. Wheels turned steadily, groaning like old guardians who had known this work for centuries. Grain poured into baskets, fine flour into jars. The air smelled faintly sweet, dust rising in soft clouds that settled on hair and hands. Mothers laughed as they brushed flour from their children's cheeks, calling it the kiss of the harvest. Yet the fields carried shadows too. Many fall clouds sometimes gathered thick and heavy, pausing above the valley as though deciding whether to bless or burden. The people remembered seasons when the rains delayed too long, when stalks bent without grain, when hunger pressed upon their songs. They did not weep loudly, they endured quietly, carrying the lesson of scarcity as carefully as they carried the jars of water from the river. Every crack in the soil, every parched furrow, was written into memory, and memory itself was a form of strength. To guard against such trials, they learned to share. When one channel overflowed, water was opened to another. When a field struggled, neighbors brought baskets from their own store. In Briston, the land was never truly owned by one. It was held in common trust, an inheritance shared like air and sky. The earth was patient, but it required patience in return. The people understood, and so, in giving to one another, they found that the soil gave more in return. At dusk, the fields exhaled. The scent of cut grass mingled with the sweetness of ripening grain. Children ran along the dikes, their laughter carried by the wind. Farmers leaned on their tools, watching the horizon, where the sun slipped gently behind the hills. It was not exhaustion they felt, but a deep calm, the satisfaction of a day lived in rhythm with the earth. Many rise in festivals. They celebrated the harvest not with riches, but with gratitude. Songs rose into the evening, simple melodies that named the river, the soil, the oxen, the patient sun. Lanterns lined the edges of the fields, their small flames swaying like stars brought down to earth. Hands clapped, feet stamped in rhythm, and for a moment the whole city seemed to breathe as one body, fed by the same bread, nourished by the same patience. Night gathered softly. The oxen returned to their pens. The water channels closed with wooden gates. The fields rested, dark and silent, but alive beneath the surface. Seeds dreamed in the soil, waiting for rain, waiting for time. The people too returned to their homes, carrying with them the smell of earth and the taste of bread. The lesson of the fields was always the same: wait, endure, and the earth will answer. It was a lesson not shouted, but whispered, carried in the breeze, remembered in the silence between harvests. And as the stars took their place above the valley, Briston lay in stillness once again. The river flowed quietly beside the fields, its song unchanged, its promise unbroken. And the city slept beneath the northern sky. In the quiet courtyards of Briston, another kind of work unfolded slower than the fields, yet no less patient. Here, earth was lifted not to grow grain, but to take new form beneath human hands. Clay, drawn from the riverbanks, was carried in baskets that left faint trails of mud across the streets. Each lump of earth seemed ordinary, a dull weight, silent and shapeless. But in the hands of the potter, the clay remembered what it could become. The potter's wheel was a small universe in itself, round and steady. It spun with the rhythm of breath. A hand pressed, another guided, and the clay rose like a column of dawn. Slowly, it bent into a jar, a bowl, a vessel that would cradle water, grain, or light. The movement was neither rushed nor hesitant. It was a dialogue between earth and flesh, between patience and form. The room smelled of damp soil and faint smoke, a fragrance that became part of the memory of every object made here. Many rise when the kiln doors opened. Fire revealed its secret miracles. Clay that had been dull now gleamed with new life shades of amber, pale cream, and the soft green of river moss. Jars cooled with a quiet crackle, as if sighing after a long transformation. Children clapped when they saw their reflections shimmering faintly on the glazed surface, marveling at how earth had turned into something so enduring, so beautiful. Mothers tested the edges of cups, smiling at the smoothness, knowing these objects would serve them for years. Each piece was not just a vessel, it was a promise, sealed by fire, carried into the rhythms of daily life. Across the lane, another craft took shape in the glow of furnaces. Copper, drawn from distant hills, was smelted in shallow pits lined with stone. The metal glowed like captured sunset. Liquid and alive, artisans leaned close, faces illuminated by the shifting red light, guiding the molten stream into molds. From that flow came bells, bracelets, hinges, and blades, objects both humble and sacred. The ring of hammer on metal echoed through the streets, steady as a heartbeat. Minifall yet fire was not always kind. Sometimes a pot cracked in the kiln, splitting with a sound like broken song. Sometimes copper cooled too quickly, leaving flaws hidden within. The artisans did not despair. They sighed, set the broken pieces aside, and began again. In Briston, failure was not shameful. It was part of the conversation with earth and fire. A cracked jar still carried memory. Sometimes it was used to store seeds. A reminder that even imperfection could shelter life. The marketplace reflected the labor of these hands. Stalls displayed rows of pottery, each piece with subtle differences: the tilt of a handle, the curve of a lip, the faint swirl of a finger left in clay. Beside them, copper gleamed, catching the afternoon sun, singing softly with every touch. People ran their hands over the surfaces, choosing not just for use, but for resonance. A woman might lift a jar and feel it belonged to her family, as though it had been waiting. A farmer might select a copper bell, its tone echoing the voice of his fields. In this way, the crafts of Briston were not commodities, they were companions, woven into the daily lives of those who carried them home. Mini-rise festivals shone with the work of these artisans. Pottery lamps lined the streets, their flames flickering like a constellation drawn to earth. Copper instruments rang out, their notes mingling with voices in song. Children balanced painted bowls on their heads in playful contests, while elders told stories of the first potter, the first smith, and the way their hands had shaped the destiny of the city. The crafts were not only useful, they were celebratory, proof that patience could yield beauty, that human hands could coax grace from silence. As evening drew near, workshops dimmed, the wheel slowed to a stop, ash settled around the kilns. Artisans washed their hands in basins of cool water, watching the clay swirl away in pale clouds, as though carrying the day's memory into the drains. The smell of smoke lingered, but softened, joining the night air with its hush. In homes across the city, the fruits of their labor found their place. A mother poured water into a new jar and smiled at the clarity it held. A father fastened a copper hinge to the door and tested its quiet swing. Children drank from cups that still carried the faint warmth of the kiln. Objects became memories, and memories became part of the city's eternal rhythm. And when sleep gathered, the wheel, the furnace, the hammer all fell silent. Yet in their silence, the work endured. Clay remembered its transformation, copper remembered its glow, and the people, resting under their roofs of stone, dreamed of vessels and bells that would outlast their voices. Night deepened. Stars spread their patient light over the rooftops, and Briston, cradled in its own crafts, returned to quiet rest, and the city slept beneath the northern sky. The heart of Briston did not beat with drums or banners. It pulsed with the rhythm of its market, where life unfolded in tones of gentleness and quiet exchange. Each afternoon, as the sun bent low and shadows stretched across the streets, the square opened like a great book waiting to be read. Traders unfolded their stalls, spreading cloths on wooden frames, arranging goods in careful rows. The air filled not with shouts but with soft murmurs, the language of patience. Stones of the marketplace had been worn smooth by generations of feet. Children traced the grooves with their toes, imagining they were secret maps left behind by ancestors. Elders sat on low stools, their eyes half closed, as though listening to the murmur of history itself. Every object placed on display carried more than value. It carried memory. A jar of honey recalled the hum of bees near the riverbanks. A basket of figs held the taste of summer captured in dark skins. Copper rings glimmered faintly, tiny suns resting on linen. Mini-Rise, a trader from the hills, entered with a cart piled high with salt. The crystals caught the light, scattering it into sparks that danced across faces. People gathered, curious, not just for the salt, but for the stories of its journey over ridges, through valleys, past streams where the water whispered in unfamiliar tongues. Children leaned close, tasting a grain on their fingertips, marveling at how something so small carried the essence of distant mountains. Laughter rippled through the square. It was not the laughter of mockery, but of wonder, the kind that makes strangers feel like kin. Near the fountain, women spread woven cloth, dyed in gentle hues of ochre, indigo, and green. They held the cloth up to the fading light, watching the colors shift as though the fabric itself breathed with the sky. Shoppers touched the folds, letting the threads slide through their fingers, feeling not just texture, but the echo of hands that had worked the loom for weeks. The exchange of cloth for grain was never hurried. It moved like conversation, unspooling slowly, with pauses for smiles and quiet reflection. Mini-Fall, a gust of wind passed suddenly, lifting the edges of stalls. A basket of seeds spilled, scattering like rain across the stones. For a moment, disorder spread, hands reaching, children chasing, merchants bending low. The market hushed, caught between laughter and concern. But then, slowly, the seeds were gathered again. Neighbors cupped them in their palms, returned them to the basket, patted its rim as though reassuring a friend. The small chaos ended not with anger, but with a sigh and a smile. Balance returned, like calm after a cloud drifts away. As the day waned, the market revealed its truest nature, not a place of profit, but of communion. Stories traveled with the goods. A jar of oil carried news of the southern groves. A bundle of herbs brought word of rain in the east. Each item was a messenger, carrying whispers of lands beyond Briston's walls. And the people listened, not with hunger for wealth, but with curiosity, as if each tale were a thread weaving their city into the wider world. Mini-Rise, as evening neared, a singer stepped forward, holding nothing in his hands but a reed flute. He played a tune low and slow, like the river winding through stones. The notes rose, drifted across the square, and settled on every ear like soft cloth. Children swayed, elders hummed in response. Even the merchants, counting their measures, paused to smile. For a moment, the marketplace became more than trade. It became a festival of sound, reminding the people that life was not only survival, but also song. The stalls began to close. Goods were folded into baskets, shahs sealed, cloth tied with rope. Lanterns were lit, one by one, their flames trembling in the evening breeze. The marketplace, once alive, with murmurs, began to quiet. Footsteps grew slower. Voices softened into goodbyes. Children tugged on their mothers' hands, already drowsy from the warmth of the day. At last, the square lay nearly empty. Only the fountain continued its steady rhythm, water falling into stone with eternal patience. The scent of bread, herbs, and smoke lingered faintly in the air, as if the market had left behind a dream for the night to carry. Above, the first stars appeared, mirroring the small lanterns still flickering at the corners of the square. The marketplace was never truly closed. Its stones remembered every step. Its air held every song, even in silence. It carried the memory of life shared, of goods exchanged, of laughter rising and falling like the tide. And as the city settled once again into stillness, the market too folded into rest, its heart beating softly beneath the weight of memory, and the city slept beneath the northern sky. The Temple of Briston did not rise like a fortress. It rose like a hymn. Each stone laid not for power, but for reverence. Steps climbed upward in patient lines, worn smooth by generations of sandals. The walls, pale as moonlight, caught the evening glow and returned it softly, as if the stones themselves remembered the touch of the sun and chose to share it. The temple stood at the city's heart, yet it was never loud. No banners flew, no horns blared. Its language was silence, and in that silence, the people found meaning. At dusk, they gathered at the base of the steps. Fathers carried small offerings of grain. Mothers brought bowls of oil. Children clutched flowers gathered from the fields, petals still carrying the warmth of daylight. The air thickened with the fragrance of herbs and faint smoke, drifting upward like a prayer too gentle for words. Many rise when the first stars pierced the velvet sky. A priest stepped forward, his hands, steady as the river's flow, lifted a reed dipped in ash. On a flat tablet of clay, he traced the position of the stars above. One for the north, one for the east, one for the constellation that bent like a sickle across the horizon. The people watched in awe, for to them the stars were more than lights. They were reminders that the heavens carried memory just as the earth did. The priest's voice was low, almost a whisper, naming each star with care. His words flowed like watersar when the Pleiades rise, harvest when they fall. Children listened wide-eyed, as if the sky itself were leaning down to teach them patience. Inside the temple, shadows swayed. Torches flickered against the walls, revealing carvings of rivers, stalks of grain, and circles that meant eternity. Incense smoke curled through the air, rising in thin strands like bridges from earth to sky. A hush filled the chamber. It was not an emptiness, but a fullness, a silence, alive with presence. Many fall outside. A cloud drifted across the heavens, veiling the stars. For a moment, the priest lowered his hand. The people grew still, remembering nights when storms had hidden the sky for weeks, leaving them blind to the rhythms they trusted. Yet even in that pause, there was no fear. The priest smiled, placing the reed aside. He whispered, "The stars do not vanish. They are only hidden for a while. Tomorrow, they will return." And with that, calm settled again, like a blanket over restless thoughts. The rituals were simple. Grain was poured onto the floor in small circles. Oil lit in clay lamps. Flowers laid gently at the base of the altar. Each act was quiet, almost domestic, as if worship was simply an extension of daily life. They did not ask the gods for victory. They asked for balance, for rain to come, but not too much, for sun to shine, but not scorch, for time to move steadily, not swiftly. Their prayers were whispers of harmony, not conquest. Mini-rise festivals filled the temple courtyard with music. Drums sounded like footsteps of the earth. Flutes echoed the wind through reeds. Men and women moved in slow circles, their arms lifted toward the stars. Children danced between them, carrying small lamps that looked like fallen constellations. For a moment, the heavens and the earth seemed to mirror one another, stars above, lamps below, both shining in rhythm with human breath. The temple became not just a building, but a meeting place of worlds. As the night deepened, the people dispersed, returning slowly to their homes. But many lingered on the steps, gazing upward. Some traced the constellations with their fingers, others closed their eyes, letting the cool night air carry the memory of the ceremony into their dreams. The temple did not empty completely. It breathed with those who stayed, its silence wrapping them in comfort. When the last torch dimmed and only the stars remained, the temple stood as it always had, a witness, a memory, a bridge between sky and stone. The carvings on its walls would one day fade, but the silence within would endure. Even centuries later, when only ruins remained, wanderers would step into the stillness and feel the echo of prayers that had never left. And so the temple rested under the watch of the stars, and Briston, with its people already asleep, breathed in time with the heavens, and the city slept beneath the northern sky. When the sun leaned low and the sky turned the color of ripe figs, the city of Briston began to prepare for its festivals. These were not moments of loud triumph or conquest. They were gatherings of gratitude, of memory, of song shared between neighbors. The streets filled slowly, like streams converging toward a single river. Lanterns were hung from doorways, their flames trembling in the first breath of evening. Children clutched reeds fashioned into little flutes, their eyes bright with anticipation. The festivals belonged to dusk. They began when the first star appeared, as if heaven itself had given its signal. Families poured into the squares carrying baskets of bread, figs, and herbs. Fires were lit in shallow pits, and the air filled with the scent of roasting grain and honey. The hum of voices grew, not sharp or hurried, but low and warm, like the steady murmur of the river. Mini-rise, the music began with a single drum. Its sound was deep, slow, like the heartbeat of the earth. Another drum answered, then a flute, then clapping hands. The rhythm spread across the square until feet began to move. First, a few, then many. Tracing the steps of dances older than memory, children joined, their movements unsteady but joyful. The old smiled and swayed from their benches, their wrinkles folding around laughter. It was not spectacle, it was participation. Every person was part of the circle, bound by rhythm, by breath, by the quiet knowledge that joy was best when shared. The dances told stories of the river's generosity, of the field's patience, of the stars' steady watch. There were no words, only gestures, hands rising like stalks of grain, feet stamping like rain falling on thirsty soil, arms sweeping outward like wind across the hills. In those movements, history was remembered, not written. And though no parchment carried the tale, the people knew it, body to body, night after night. Minifall, there was always a pause, a hush between the songs. Torches flickered lower, and the air grew still. In that silence, some remembered names that no longer answered, voices that had once joined the circle but had since fallen into the earth. Eyes grew wet, not from grief alone, but from the tender weight of memory. The music softened to a single flute, its notes drifting upward like smoke. For a moment, the festival seemed suspended between joy and sorrow, between presence and absence. Yet, even this quiet was part of the celebration. For in Briston, to remember was not to weep without end, but to honor, to carry forward. Children, watching the faces of their parents, learned that joy and loss walked together, neither complete without the other. When the drum began again, it was not to erase the silence, but to hold it within the rhythm. The circle widened once more. Laughter returned, and the festival continued with deeper meaning. As night deepened, lamps multiplied, placed on windowsills, on stone steps, on the edges of fountains. They turned the city into a constellation of earthbound stars. Shadows danced on walls. Playful and tender, food was shared until baskets were empty, and songs carried until voices grew hoarse. Even strangers found themselves embraced, offered bread or figs without question. The festival was not about possession, but about belonging. Mini-rise at the festival's height, children released small boats into the river, each carrying a flame. The water caught the light and carried it downstream, as though the stars themselves had decided to visit the city. Floating gently past, gasps rose from the banks, soft exclamations of wonder. The boats drifted like glowing prayers, fragile yet enduring, their flames trembling but refusing to die. This was Briston's truest gift, the ability to find eternity in fragile things, to make beauty from patience, to hold silence and song together in one breath. When the fires burned low and the flutes quieted, families returned to their homes. Children slept on shoulders, their small hands still curled as if grasping the rhythm of the dance. The old leaned on the young, smiling faintly as they whispered blessings into the night air. The square emptied slowly, the festival folding into memory like a song finishing its final verse. Yet the city did not feel empty. The echoes of drums lingered in the stones. The fragrance of herbs clung to the air. The stars above seemed closer, as though they, too, had danced, and so Briston returned to rest, its joy safely carried into silence, its sorrow transformed into gratitude. And as lanterns dimmed one by one, the city curled back into itself like a child into sleep, and the city slept beneath the northern sky. The people of Briston knew that life was never only song and festival. Like the river, which could whisper or roar, The seasons carried both kindness and trial. Yet even their hardships arrived not as thunderclaps, but as mist slow, steady, wrapping the city in a veil that tested patience more than strength. One morning, the sky dimmed earlier than it should have. Clouds gathered on the horizon, heavy and low, their bellies swollen with rain. The air smelled of iron and damp soil, a warning that the river would soon rise beyond its gentle rhythm. Farmers along the banks tightened ropes around their boats, pulling them higher onto the shore. Mothers gathered baskets of grain and stored them in lofts above the hearth. Children, wide-eyed, listened to the silence before the storm. Many rise when the first drops fell. They landed with the soft insistence of footsteps. Rain washed the dust from the city's stones, made the limestone gleam as if freshly carved. For a while, people laughed, letting the cool water touch their skin. Children stretched their arms to the sky, mouths open to taste the gift. The city seemed renewed, rinsed clean by heaven's hand. But the rain did not stop. It thickened, became a curtain, then a wall. The river swelled, licking at its banks, tugging at the roots of willows. Bridges groaned under the strain of rising water. The cheerful shouts of children gave way to the worried murmurs of elders. Many fall streets that had been paths became streams, and courtyards turned into shallow ponds. The people of Briston did not cry out in panic. They moved together, steady as always. Neighbors helped neighbors lift jars of oil and sacks of flour to higher ground. Farmers carried goats and chickens into stone halls, turning temples and workshops into shelters. The city bent, but it did not break. At night, torches reflected in the floodwaters, flickering as though the stars had descended to rest on the streets. Children huddled close to their parents, listening to the muffled roar of the river. They were told stories of earlier floods, when the city had endured and recovered. Fear became gentler in the telling. Even in trial, there was memory to guide them. Many rise when dawn finally came. The rain eased. Clouds thinned. Sunlight pierced through in pale columns, touching the swollen river with gold. The waters began to fall, slowly, reluctantly, leaving behind pools in fields and silt on doorsteps. Families emerged into the brightness, stretching arms that had grown stiff from shelter. Children splashed in the shallow water, laughing again, turning hardship into play. Mothers hung wet cloths on lines that glistened like silver threads. Fathers pressed their palms into the damp earth, testing its strength, nodding at its resilience. Yet the scars remained. Many fall too gardens were gone, swallowed by the river's hunger. A small bridge had collapsed, leaving only timbers caught in reeds downstream. Families looked upon the losses quietly, with sighs but not despair. They knew the land would return in time, and that patience was as necessary as seed. They gathered what could be saved, stacked stones for repair, and whispered prayers not of anger, but of endurance. In Briston, trials were not punishments. They were lessons written in water and wind. Every flood taught caution. Every drought taught sharing. Every storm taught humility. The city carried these lessons like hidden treasures, passing them from parent to child, from child to memory. And so, when the next season brought drought instead of flood. The people were ready. Channels opened and closed with care. Water measured into cups and bowls. Families shared from their stores, ensuring no one starved. The earth hardened, the grass withered, yet still the city endured. Their strength was not in conquering hardship, but in absorbing it, letting it flow through them like mist that lingers but does not destroy. Many rise when rain finally returned after months of dryness. The people gathered in the square, the faces lifted. The first drops struck the dust, releasing a fragrance that was half memory, half miracle. Children danced barefoot. Elders raised their arms. Voices lifted in gratitude. The mist of trial had passed, and from it, patience had grown stronger roots. Night returned as it always did. The city, scarred yet whole, lay beneath a sky of stars. The river, calmed once more, murmured its eternal song, and in the silence after trial, Briston rested, knowing it had endured again. And the city slept beneath the northern sky. The walls of Briston were never mute, even in their silence. They spoke of hands that built them, of lives that leaned upon them, of memories pressed into every layer of plaster. Stone was not just stone here, it was the city's diary, written without ink, read without words. At dawn, the walls glowed with the same pale light that kissed the river. Children traced their fingers along cracks and carvings, as though following lines on a map that led backward into time. Some walls carried painted figures, boats with curved prows, stalks of grain bending in imagined wind, a sun rising over hills. The colors were faded, but not gone. Ochre still clung like dried blood, indigo like the shadow of twilight. Each mural was a whisper from ancestors, telling those who came later we lived, we worked, we remembered. Mini-rise scribes added their marks in soot and clay. On fresh plaster, they pressed signs for bread, water, patience. The strokes were simple, yet filled with weight. A mark for the river curved like a sleeping serpent. A mark for grain stretched like a stalk bending beneath its harvest. Children learned to recognize these signs long before they could speak in full sentences. They would point and smile, proud to know the city's secret language. And thus, memory was passed not only through words carried on the tongue, but through lines carried on stone. Inside homes, walls held smaller, theatre, tea, records. A mother painted flowers above her hearth, petals circling in a ring of calm. A father etched a pattern near the doorway, a charm against storms. Children drew crude figures in charcoal, laughing as they gave them names. The walls accepted it all, every careful stroke, every playful smudge. Nothing was too small to remember. Many fall, yet walls also bore scars. Here, a crack stretched like a dark river from floor to ceiling, the mark of an old earthquake. There, plaster crumbled where floodwater had once risen, leaving stains that no pigment could cover. The people did not hide these blemishes. They left them as reminders, lessons carved not by human hands, but by time itself. When a visitor asked why the cracks remained, a Briston elder would smile and say, because forgetting would be heavier than remembering. Temples carried the most enduring murals. On their inner walls, constellations spread in careful lines, stars captured in pigment and ash. Each night the priests compared sky to wall, tracing the slow drift of heaven across the seasons. To them, the temple was not only a place of worship, but a great calendar, teaching the people when to sow, when to reap, when to rest. Every wall was both a record and a teacher, offering wisdom in silence. Many rise during festivals. Fresh plaster was laid on certain walls, ready to receive new memory. Artists climbed ladders, dipping reeds into colored powders mixed with lime. They painted circles of dancers, waves of musicians, baskets overflowing with bread. Children gathered at the base, craning their necks, gasping as figures bloomed above them. The city seemed to paint itself alive, layering new joy upon old stories. And when the paint dried, Briston carried yet another page in its silent book. But memory is never permanent. Many fall time eroded pigment, crumbled plaster, loosened stone. Some murals blurred into nothing more than shadows. A word once clear became a faint smudge, a symbol half forgotten. The people sighed, but they did not despair. They knew that even when the walls lost their colors, the memory lived on in those who had seen them, in those who carried the stories forward by voice and by heart. The wall remembered, and so did the people. Even centuries later, when a traveler leaned close to a half-broken wall, they could still trace the curve of a figure, the outline of a stalk, the ghost of a star. They might not know the full meaning, yet they felt its weight. The stones carried an intimacy beyond translation, whispering across time, "We were here, and so are you." At night, when torches dimmed and the people slept, the walls continued their quiet vigil. They absorbed the day's warmth, held it through the darkness, and returned it gently in the morning. Each sunrise revealed once more the painted lives, the carved prayers, the scars of time, and in doing so, the city remained alive, even in its silence. The walls of Briston were not merely boundaries, they were memory made visible, patience made stone, and when the stars spread across the northern sky, the city folded once more into its nightly rest, surrounded by the soft murmur of its own remembered past, and the city slept beneath the northern sky. The end of Briston did not come with a cry. It came like the slow fading of a song, a melody remembered even after the instruments had fallen silent. There were no flames, no armies breaking the gates, no trumpet that announced collapse. Instead, there was distant families leaving one by one, steps becoming fewer on the cobblestones, doorways closing without reopening at dawn. The signs were subtle at first, a shutter left unlatched, swaying in the wind. A courtyard where weeds grew tall because no one came to sweep them. The market square, once filled with murmurs, now quiet enough that the fountain's rhythm echoed too loudly. The city was not abandoned in fear, it was released, like a garment too worn to mend, folded carefully and set aside. Many rise before leaving. Some families marked their walls with new drawings. A child pressed her hand in wet clay, leaving a print that would remain long after her footsteps had faded. A father etched a line of grain stalks into the plaster, as if promising that memory itself would feed whoever came after. A mother painted a circle of stars above her doorway, her brush steady though her eyes brimmed with unshed tears. These gestures were not despairing. They were offerings, quiet affirmations that Briston had been more than stone and soil. It had been a place of lives fully lived. Yet, as weeks became months, the silence deepened. Many-full jars were left unfilled, kilns unlit, hearths gone cold. The smell of bread, once the heartbeat of every morning, vanished. Lanterns no longer glowed in windows at dusk. The city became a shell, its breath withdrawn. And yet, even in this emptiness, there was no violence, only stillness. Briston slipped gently from presence into memory. The way mist dissolves into air, travelers who passed through found the streets strangely peaceful. They noted the orderliness of the homes, the absence of ruin. It seemed less like a place destroyed and more like a place asleep, waiting for voices to return. Some said the people had followed the river to new lands, carrying with them seeds, tools, and stories. Others believed they had simply dispersed, scattering like petals after a festival, each carrying a fragment of Briston in their hearts. No one could say for certain. The city itself remained, a question written in stone. Many rise in time. Nature entered where humans had stepped away. Moss spread across doorways, painting the city in green silence. Birds nested in the beams of abandoned roofs. Wildflowers rose between the cracks of the marketplace, blooming where baskets of figs had once stood. The temple became a haven for swallows, their calls echoing like faint prayers. At night, foxes padded softly through the streets, pausing at fountains to drink under the light of stars. The city was not gone, it had simply changed guardians. But memory lingered. Many-full travelers whispered that on quiet nights, one could still hear the echoes of Briston's life, the faint beat of drums, as if a festival continued unseen, the low hum of voices in the marketplace, rising and falling with the wind, the laughter of children carried faintly across the river. Perhaps it was imagination. Perhaps it was the walls themselves, remembering aloud. Either way, the city refused to be erased. Generations later, wanderers stood before its faded murals, running their hands across lines too faint to read. They did not know the names, but they felt the weight. Here was a river. Here was a stalk of grain. Here was a star. It was enough. Memory did not need clarity to endure. It needed only presence, only patience. And so Briston passed into legend, not with fire, but with silence. It became a story told by rivers, by moss, by the slow crumble of plaster. Its people became invisible, yet their patience lived on in every stone that refused to fall. Even in departure, the city kept its rhythm calm, steady, eternal. When night spread once more across the northern sky, Briston rested in its final form, not as a place of the living, but as a cradle of memory. And though no fires burned in its hearths, though no lanterns lit its alleys, the city seemed still alive, breathing quietly in its sleep, and the city slept beneath the northern sky. If you walk where Briston once stood, the river will greet you first. Its waters still murmur against the stones, as if they have never stopped whispering the names of those who once lived beside them. Reeds bend in the same rhythm, and willows still lean over the current, their branches brushing the surface with gestures older than memory. The city may have emptied, but the earth remembers. The walls remain, though softened by time. A fragment of plaster still carries the faint curve of a painted stalk. A doorway, though broken, still opens into a space where a hearth once glowed. The marketplace lies silent, its stones warmed by the sun. But if you close your eyes, you may hear footsteps, the shuffle of baskets, the laughter of children weaving through stalls. It is not imagination alone, it is memory carried forward by place, as though stone itself holds the breath of the past. The fields beyond the city lie in grass now. Yet when the wind moves, it ripples like grain. The soil, dark and rich, still carries the memory of seed and harvest. If you kneel and press your hand into the earth, you may feel it pulse faintly, the echo of oxen's steps, the weight of carts, the rhythm of labor long gone but never erased. Patience remains. Even without those who once gave it shape, the temple stands in ruin, but its silence is not emptiness. Birdsong fills its halls, wings replace chants, and yet the stillness feels the same. At night, stars spread overhead in the very patterns once traced by priests. The heavens continue their ancient rhythm, indifferent yet constant, reminding us that we too are brief visitors in a long story. Briston's priests are gone, but the sky they read is unchanged. The festivals no longer echo through the squares. Yet when dusk settles, the air carries scents of herbs and smoke from distant fires, as though the city itself remembers how to celebrate. Lantern light may be absent, but the stars above are brighter than any flame. It is easy to imagine the circle of dancers still moving, shadows swaying on walls that no longer stand. Joy leaves traces too, just as sorrow does. And what of the trials? Floods and droughts have passed into silence, their scars hidden by grass and moss. Yet the lessons remain: patience, endurance. Sharing these were not erased when the people departed. They live on in those who tell the story, who hear the whisper of the river and recall the lives built upon its banks. Perhaps this is Briston's greatest gift, not its walls, not its crafts, not even its murals, but its quiet philosophy. That life is not measured in conquest, but in patience. That memory is not kept only in words, but in silence, in stone, in water. That even departure can be gentle, leaving behind not ruin, but rest. If you listen long enough, you may understand why the city feels less like a ruin and more like a sleeper. It has not vanished, it dreams, and in its dream, it holds the laughter, the songs, the festivals, the gentle trials, the enduring patience of those who once called it home. Night falls, as it always has. The northern sky stretches wide, scattering its stars like ancient script. The river whispers, the stones cool, and Briston, wrapped in memory, rests, and the city slept beneath the northern sky.